Hello and welcome. On December 31st, 2013, a new fundraising campaign appeared on the site Indiegogo. It was asking for $7,500 to assist in the production of a short film. The title of that film was The Goblin Baby. In the end, over $10,000 was raised, and that film is now nearing the end of its production activity and being prepared for screenings. And we are fortunate to have the writer, producer, and director of that effort, Shoshana Rosenbaum, in the studios today. Welcome, Shoshana.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. You know, this is fascinating because talk about somebody taking something from the initial concept into an actual product and being involved in every step of the process. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to talk to someone about how they do this. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
And let's get started on the journey. Now, the initial idea for the story of The Goblin Baby, how did that come about?
Well, I have 3 children myself. My oldest is about to turn 9. So about 10 years ago, when I was pregnant with her, I definitely started thinking about how growing another person inside of you and is one of the most transformative experiences that we have as humans, whether you're the one who actually bears the child or not. So actually I wrote a kind of very science fiction-y story around the time more about pregnancy. But the idea for The Goblin Baby came after my daughter was born, and I think it was, I was living in an old house in a neighborhood that had a lot of woods, where I still live now. And one night I was doing the dishes, my husband was out of town, and everything was very quiet, and I had the baby monitor on, and I just glanced over it, and I thought, the kind of thought that writers have, like, what if I heard some crazy supernatural sound come out of that? What would I do? What would it be? What would happen next? So I think that was sort of the kernel of, thankfully that didn't happen to me, but it sort of, planted a seed of a supernatural retelling of this postpartum period. So,
that's the genesis of the idea, but that's 9 years ago. When did you actually decide to write and have the idea of, rather than being a short story, making it into a film?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think right around that same time, I was making the transition from writing fiction to writing screenplays. And I'm a visual artist also. I paint, and I've been a photographer for a long time. And so I always kind of wanted to put those two together and make a film. But, in the past, it was hard for me to kind of get my head around, like, well, how would I go about making a movie? Like, you can, anybody can sit down and write whatever they want in a notebook. But actually, to raise the funds and gather the crew and shoot a movie is a lot, a bigger production. So I think that but I started writing screenplays anyway. I took my first writing class about 10 years ago, just because I wanted to try out the genre, and I found that I really liked it. Sometimes when I write fiction, I could tend to get just mired in how much text there is. And the visual way of storytelling and the way screenplays are written, which is much more terse, really worked for me, because when I think about a story, I see it visually. So that's sort of how I got into making this particular story. It's not my first screenplay, but I guess the other side of it is I had written, the first thing I really labored over was a feature, which was very long, very complicated, involved 2 different historical eras, also has a supernatural bent to it. But it was not something that, as a first-time filmmaker, I could make. And I think I decided, after kind of sending that off and trying to get people interested in that, I thought, I really want to write something that I can make myself, like shoot in my house, in my neighborhood. And so at some point I connected those two, and I took that little kernel I had years earlier, and I started working on the story.
Well, how long did it take from the time you started until you had a screenplay you were satisfied with?
I think about 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a 14-page screenplay.
Well, when it's right, it's right. When it's not, it's not. So, okay, you have your screenplay, step 1. Now, you entered this script into a competition here in D.C., the D.C. Shorts Film Festival Screenplay Competition. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what occurred?
Sure. Well, DC Shorts is a great film festival. It's all short films, so it has to be under 20 minutes. And one of the neat things they do is they showcase writers in that they have a competition, hundreds of people send in their scripts, and then those are read and narrowed down to 6 finalists. Those 6 finalists get to cast their scripts and direct them, and they do a stage reading in a theater before a live audience, and then the audience gets to vote on which one they want to see produced into a film.
Right.
So, so I entered that contest. I was one of the finalists. I was the only woman finalist, which is kind of common in the screenwriting and film world.
Unfortunately, so, yeah.
And I had seen actually a screenwriting friend of mine, Heidi Willis. So her scripts had been a finalist the year before, and I'd gone to the event and I had seen how much fun it was to see these scripts come alive on stage with actors. So I was really excited when I was chosen to be a finalist in the following year. And I loved the process of working with the actors and getting to direct it.
How do you pick your actors for something like that? I mean, is there like a pool that you can just kind of fish from, or what?
Well, the film festival really helps out. DC Shorts they do the casting call. They kind of put the synopsis of the 6 screenplays out there,
right.
And then actors and with your email address and the actor. So I had about 75 actors who submitted for the reading.
75?
Yeah, for six roles, which is great. And then they do a big audition for also all the writers come into the theater, the same theater that's going to be performed at, and one after. Well, I guess what you do is you invite, maybe the 30 actors you want to see, but you actually get to see anybody that has been invited by any of the writers. They're all at once. And then the actors leave the room, and then they just, the director of this festival says, okay, we got to divvy them up. And so you kind of have to lobby for the ones that you want and maybe trade somebody with another writer.
It's like fantasy football.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of have to come to an agreement. And I've heard that some years that's a little more contentious. My year, it was very collegial. Everybody was very nice and said, well, I want that person. And if you give me that person, I'll give you this person. And so I really got everybody I wanted for the reading. So it was great.
It's a good thing you didn't have the actors in there. They'd hate being treated like a piece of meat.
Yes, no, they would. It would have been very hard. But then they come out and they say, this is all the day of the competition, by the way. This is the morning. And then the actors are waiting outside for like half an hour, and then the writers come out and say, okay, here's my cast. And then they give you a place in the theater to rehearse, and you have a couple hours to rehearse your actors. What was that experience like for your first time? It was great. It's really, this experience of being in the screenplay competition is what gave me the momentum to make the film. And the first step of that was working with the actors, because to read it with them and to realize that they each connected with the story in their own way. And what's interesting is this is a story that I think parents of young children easily connect with, but actually very few of the actors who were in the reading had any children. But I found that they each had a different thing in it, that the supernatural element helped a lot, and just sort of everybody at some point in their life has had some kind of metamorphosis, like transformative experience where they feel like they're breaking out of their old self and going into a new one. So everybody found something they could relate to, and that was really gratifying for me as a writer, because I felt like, okay, well, maybe people want to see this movie. Well, you're getting constant feedback from your actors, and then in the performance, I'm sure, you got feedback again, and that was positive. You didn't win. Yep. But you placed second. Yes. And what happens next? Well, so what happened next is I could have gone home and said, oh, I didn't win. Oh, well, I guess I'll write another screenplay. But what I decided was, given the experience I'd had with the actors and also with the audience, because after the reading, even though I didn't win, a lot of the audience members came up to me and told me what they liked about it, what they connected with it. And over again, what I heard was, I really want to see this be a movie. This is the one of all the scripts I heard that I can really see being a movie. Like, I could see it in my head. That, and also people came up and said, how can I help? Do you want to use my house? Can I do, I know somebody who's a DP who could shoot this, or just people started offering help. And I felt like, okay, I think I'm going to just ride this momentum and make this happen. So the next step is what? The next step was figuring out how to raise the money. Right. And at first, I had no experience with that. So I talked to as many people as I could. Luckily, there's a really supportive group here in Washington, Women in Film and Video, WIF, which is just an incredibly supportive group of mostly women, but also some men who are wonderful. So I just kept talking to anybody I knew who either was involved with WIF or had been involved in film production in any way, or raised money. And I just tried to take people out for coffee, whoever I could buy a cup of coffee for, and ask them, like, here's what I want to do. What can you tell me about, what do you think? And then just listened. And what I finally came around to was crowdfunding is not only a great way to raise money, it's also a way to build your audience. Because even if somebody gives you $1, you know, even that's all they contribute.
They want to see the finished
They want to
product.
see the movie. And so the hardest thing I think about filmmaking is you spend all this time making it, but then actually getting anyone to see it is the next step. So I thought that sounded pretty good to not only raise the money, but also start building like a core audience.
But when I see the pages, and I saw your fundraising page, there's a lot of work that goes into that even before you post it.
There is.
And then afterwards, I would imagine keeping people apprised of what's going to happen and everything else like that that must have been a very busy time.
It was, yeah. That might have been the busiest time of the whole process.
even busier than the filming.
Well, the film we actually shot over 5 days. That was spread out over about a month. Those days on which we shot were obviously very, very busy, and the whole thing was busy. But the crowdfunding is kind of a 24-hour thing because, you know, the way you keep people interested is really through social media, and that's 24/7. So I did sleep, but it was a very busy time.
Now, you exceeded your goal. How did it feel when you got past that 7,500?
It felt great. You know, it was a surprise. I mean, I really did not, I didn't really know how it was going to go, but I didn't expect that we would meet our goal in the first 10 days. So, because we said, you know, I had been, the things I read and people I talked to said, you know, make your fundraising goal, your time period short. And that often 30 days is recommended because then it has some sort of, you know, some momentum. It's people look at it and like, oh, I have to contribute because this is almost over.
Yes.
But I didn't expect it to be 10 days. So one of my co-producers, Victoria Buxbazen, she said, you know, that we should think about a stretch goal. We should think about, because we were 7,500 was kind of like the minimum to just get it made. That was just it. And she said, let's talk about what can we do, how can we raise the production value? And the other, you know, if we had, say, $10,000. So we'd made a new budget, a stretch goal budget, and we thought about that. And then we also thought, you know, this is a movie that brings up the issue of postpartum depression, and is there a way that we can also contribute to that? So we decided, okay, we'll give a percentage of whatever we raise beyond our goal to an organization that helps women with postpartum issues.
Terrific. And so it was $10,386 was the final amount raised. Now you got to go make a movie.
Yep.
So we start with gathering a crew. Was it basically people you talked to before? Did you have in mind at that point who you wanted as a part of your team?
To some extent. I had the good fortune of WIF, the organization I mentioned before, was making a web series for the first time. And I volunteered to work as a production assistant on that. Mainly I didn't have a lot of production experience myself, and I also wanted to meet crew and I wanted to see them in action. So I got a chance to observe people and kind of think about who I might want to work with. And then approach them, give them the script, see if they connected to it. And if they did, then ask them to join the team.
Okay, you've got your crew. Now you've already been through one casting process. So the next casting process is a piece of cake. You're right. But once you've got your team together and you start production, now you're directing. What was that experience like for the first time in framing the shots and doing that? Was it a collaborative process with the actors and your DP, your chief photographer? How did that work? How did you approach that?
It was very collaborative with my DP, and he is somebody who has a lot more experience in making films than I do. So that was, and you know, I chose him because he had all that experience. His name is Aaron Shirley, and he. You know, I knew I wanted to work with him when he read the script, and he said, I'm into this. I want to tell this story. And he also came on as a co-producer. So, I mean, Aaron and I worked very collaboratively. We sat down with the script, and we talked about how do we want to tell this story? What do we want to see? And we did the storyboarding. You know, he did the storyboards, brought them to me, and I would give him feedback and say, well, actually, I want to make sure we see this at this point. And with the actors, it was not collaborative in terms of like how shots were framed or how they were, but I wanted to give the actors room. I mean, I'm not an actor.
To interpret the character.
I wanted it to be authentic. I didn't want to say, okay, say it like this, walk over there.
Right.
I wanted, you know, so how I worked with the actors was more, what do you think your character is going through? I mean, the lines are there, so why does he say this? And where do you think he goes in the room, or does he leave? Or, you know, and I tried to leave a lot of room for them to be able to make it an authentic, have some ownership over it, make it an authentic performance for themselves.
Well, why don't we take a look at just a short peek at the Goblin Baby.
I only see pajamas in here. You don't want to keep the blankets with the pajamas in the same drawer.
You know what? Let's switch.
Oh, goody. Yay. There's my boy. Come here. Here's my boy. Look what Grammy got you. Wash them today. There we go. There we go. Here. Once upon a time, a mother had a beautiful baby. But the goblins were jealous. They came in the night to steal him.
Sounds like a real wholesome bedtime story.
When the mother returned to the crib, she found that the goblins had laid a changeling there. Looked almost like her child, but was not.
You know what? It's bedtime.
Well, that was kind of cool. Now, okay, you've shot it all. You've basically done most of the editing. I mean, there's some minor technical work to be done on the film. What do you do next? Now, we're running a little low on time, but you must have some specific plans for what you're going to do to market this.
But the first thing we're going to do is send it to festivals, and we're trying to target those, festivals that program films like this, general festivals, maybe some in the suspense horror genre. It's not really a horror film, but it's a creepy film, and then women's festivals, because it really is a film that has a lot of women's issues.
Exactly, exactly. So once you've done this, I mean, you've been through the process. You know what your strengths are. You know what worked, what didn't work. You've got a film that you're happy with. I have to ask you this: when you see the finished product, is it what you saw in your head, or is it better? It's
not exactly. When you're a writer, you can kind of run it in your head, and you don't realize how many details you can leave out or put in, and it's all magic in your. And so I have to say there was a little bit of a process where I had to, when I first saw the footage, I had to separate myself from whatever had been in my head. I mean, I was very happy with the photography, with the actors, everything, but it became a new thing. It wasn't the story I had written in my head anymore. It was something on film. So. Okay, we're almost out of time, and so, although perhaps we'll bring you back when you're doing some future projects, and we'll talk some more about that. But if people want to follow what's going on with Goblin Baby, where should they go to get the information about where it's progressing? The best place is our website, which is www.goblinbabymovie.com. And with that, they'll be able to follow the rest of the process, and they'll be able to follow the festival circuit as you travel it. Exactly. And find places to watch it themselves. Absolutely. Shoshana, thank you so much for being here on Fast Forward. Again, congratulations on this long trek to a successful conclusion. Thank you for having me. Owen, it's been our pleasure. Thank you for coming. Well, that's it for this edition of Fast Forward. We hope you found something of interest. We hope you come see us again. Until then, this is Tom Schad saying, take care.